Welcome to another episode of Haven of Horror, and I have been waiting for this one all week. Probably longer than all week since I heard about these. So, I'm going to let Milton start us off with Fear Street Part 1, 1994.
Look, some guy killed a bunch of people at the mall last night.
Holy shit.
Because unfortunately, Milton did not have time to finish Part 2, so I will be doing the majority of the talking on that one. Don't apologize. I didn't finish The Fog a couple weeks ago, so do this by myself. I need someone to bounce words off of, so to speak. So Milton, start us off with Fear Street Part 1, 1994.
Okay. Fear Street is about basically the town of Sunnyvale versus the town of Shadyside in basically Shadyside serial killers or just outright just flat out mass murderers with no particular rhyme or reason. So much so to the point that the town has embraced this depression, and Sunnyvale seems to kind of egg them on in some ways. It's there's still not a lot of details that we get because it's part 1 of part 4 apparently. Part 4, which is going to premiere on
3 parts.
Well, I know there's 3 parts right now, but there's going to be a 4th part.
No, there's
right?
2 now, and there's going to be a 3rd one.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, my bad, guys. But yes, Fear Street basically type fear is actually based on basically the possession of a girl named Fear, F-I-E-R, who apparently was executed as a witch in 1666. The kids who are the focus of the story eventually uncover more and more pieces to the puzzle of why these possessions happen, why she seems to basically gain control of these long-dead killers in order to basically take revenge on people who disturb her rest. And that's the general concept for part 1 specifically. A character named Dina is basically having just teenage angst about her breaking up with her girlfriend Sam. Yeah, just based a lot of teen dramas happening between schools, and eventually they discover Sarah Fear, and yeah, chaos ensues. They try to stop the kill.
Yeah. So this is obviously a throwback to the 90s in multiple ways. I think. I don't know anything about the Fear Street books. Those were the teenage version of Goosebumps, right? And when those were big, I was still in the age group that I was reading Goosebumps, so I'm more familiar with that than I am this. So I don't know if these are just pulling things here and there from different books, if this is an adaptation of a specific book. I didn't really look into it because I wanted to go in this blind and appreciate it for what it is. Milton, you've seen Scream, right?
Yes, thanks to you and a group of friends that we have online.
Oh yeah, that's right. This was looking a lot at Scream, right? This is almost a 90s slasher. Not quite as good as Scream. But it's looking at that kind of formula for a slasher movie.
It's a movie that is definitely looking back at the tropes and styles of movies like that, especially Scream, I would say. It has some self-awareness, but is not exactly as... it doesn't commit so much to the idea of this is a horror movie about horror movies, to the point where it becomes dark comedy, so to speak. This one takes the idea a bit more seriously, I would say, but still managing to try to be its own thing.
I had heard that I can't remember her name, but the girl at the beginning that was the main thing that made me think of Scream, right? You start out with an actress that a lot of people know now, and you think she's going to be the main girl, and then she dies. She was in Stranger Things, season 3. That is Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's daughter. I think her name is Mira, but I could be wrong. I had heard she was in this movie, so I was kind of amused that she dies right away. She's the cold open. The kills of this are really good, but I'm going to rewind a little bit. Because the movie starts in the mall, from if I remember correctly. I just watched this, but I watched these back to back, so bits from here and there are bleeding together. I don't know if I believe, because I think the idea is because they start playing Closer by Nine Inch Nails. I don't know if I buy that a mall is playing Nine Inch Nails over its loudspeakers.
Apparently, Shady Side is rather so. There's a lot of things that I could get into with its overt symbolism. This movie wears its politics on its sleeve, like quite prominently, kind of waves it around quite a bit. And I know that it does because not only did I have that feeling while watching it, I also looked at some of the behind the scenes stuff that the filmmakers talked about. And they're very much for the idea of the political other of sorts. So I guess there's this whole thing about like like the heavy metal movement, like kind of like speaking to those who were, put on the outside in society. It kind of speaks to a sense of the teenage angst or young adult angst that quite a few people were feeling at the time, apart from say the in crowds or whatnot. But of course, that theme of the other kind of goes into a lot of different stuff. Dina and Sam were lesbians in the '90s. That's another thing that gets into it. You have the nerd who, by default, apparently is just othered as well because he's a nerd and he's very attentive to these rather crucial details. Most of the people are, if not trying to just have a serious relationship, are usually sexual deviants or drug dealers or rather violent in some ways. Not to say that Sunnyvale is any better. They take pride in the fact that they're better than their neighbors, and well, they feed into it as well. They both communities kind of feed into each other a bit. This is all an aside to say, yeah, you're right. I don't buy that a mall would be doing heavy metal music, but it goes along in the theme that they're trying to do.
Well, I don't. It wasn't the fact that it's heavy metal, because that song was very popular when it came on, and it was played on radios.
Sure. But
Although
in the
obviously
mall,
very cleaned up. And keep in mind, in '94, I was 2 years old, so by the time I was old enough to remember things, like that song had already moved on from its popularity. But yeah, that's a very explicit song. Um, and I would think you'd be in '94, you'd be playing like Nirvana or like Pearl Jam. Don't get me wrong, I love the soundtrack to this movie. I don't know if it all fits correctly. Um, but I'm glad you mentioned Sunnyvale. I don't know if you had this, but the first time they mentioned it, I thought they said Sunnydale.
I did think that too, actually. And
And I
you
was
know why
like,
we would think that because
I
Buffy.
was like, oh, that's a nice little reference, I guess.
No, but
And then they
now
said
it's
it again. I was like, oh,
Sunnyvale.
it's Sunnyvale, which
Yeah.
I still, I wonder if that's like a town in the books or if that's an homage, because this show or this movie is set just a few years before Buffy would air. Um,
Maybe. I'm not sure. I haven't read the original book, so I can't put a frame of reference. I tried looking at some of the differences between adaptations and couldn't find a lot of stuff. Um,
I think when because I'm going to Half Price Books tomorrow, I might look and see if they got a couple of those.
yeah,
I'd
that'd
be
be cool.
interested.
I would be interested to investigate how it strays from the adaptation, or how closely it sticks to it.
Well, because if they're anything like Goosebumps, I imagine they're just like each book is a standalone like horror story. Um, but yeah, I kind of agree with you about this movie. This is a movie about outcasts, and it kind of captures at least what I think the Hollywood version of the '90s like Generation X.
Yeah, I guess. I was born in '95. I guess not too far away from where you were. Um, I guess I was more of a 2000s kid just by default, by the fact that I would have been 4 when, well, actually 5 actually when the new year would hit. No, 4. Shoot, whatever. Math. Um, I don't know. This may be depending just based on where I grew up. I've never seen a mall that has such a prominent like sex shop kind of like kiosk in a mall that was just right there and very accessible for people to look at, like blow up dolls and all that. That was also rather surprising to me that they had something like that present. It just goes to the question, like, what is wrong with Shady's side? What is going on?
See, I kind of agree with you, except for it's kind of a plot point that there's something wrong with this town.
True. Yeah.
Um, going back to 1666, which, if you weren't aware, is the third part of this.
Yes, I was aware of that part. I thought there
I'm
was going to
really-
be a fourth or something, but I guess
They announced this as a trilogy. But yeah, so basically, people start dying. I thought it was going to be, because a lot of slashers are whodunits in a way, almost. I guess I shouldn't say a lot, but like there's a good number of them that are whodunits. And with this I think kind of looking at Scream, which is obviously famously a whodunit, I was like, oh, it's going to be a mystery who the killer is, because I didn't know there was anything supernatural about this. I went in almost completely blind, and then they reveal who the killer is, but it's not that simple.
No.
Because he gets shot like right away, and I was like, oh shit, okay, what's going on? And the story, the main story that is going to tie what looks like all three of these movies together feels very young adult, which makes sense because these are based on young adult books. And for me personally, this doesn't bother me, but I was curious about you because I watch a lot more horror movies than you do, and I don't necessarily notice sometimes. Do you think that the young adultness of this story kind of clashes with how adult like kills and the subject matter in some of this is?
That's yeah. No, you see, I was wrestling over that too. I was also wrestling over how I felt about the characters as well, because it's hard because some of this is particularly brutal, even though this isn't necessarily a level of violence we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
We've seen pretty violent kills, but this one kind of takes its time with like really just showing a lot more of the savagery of the violence. Like we showed like in slow motion, we get to see the emotions of the victims quite a bit more. We don't do as many cutaways. We kind of see the action as it's happening in some ways to like really just with the camera work to show just how brutal the action is, which not a lot of movies did back then, but this one seems to have like a bit more intimate look into like the actions of the killer. We'd like to turn away, but we can't. Um, in some ways, I like that. Um, Again, it's difficult. I think it might be a matter of personal taste. I'm not going to count the movie against it. In fact, I actually like that idea. The fact that we can take this sort of seriously, I think, adds some weight to the drama that we feel. Um, of course, it's all dependent on whether we like the characters that we're watching on screen, and that I feel a little more mixed on personally.
So obviously I grew up watching like the 80s slashers, where the characters are all kind of trashy because you're there for the killer. But I have to say I'm 50-50 on the characters. I really like the main girl, and kind of
Yeah.
her, is that her name? I'm terrible with names.
The one we
Oh.
see first, right? Whoops, my camera went out. That's weird.
Yeah, the main girl who's a lesbian.
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, I think we're talking about Dina here.
Okay. But I really liked her, and I liked her relationship with that girl. Oh, are you having some issues there?
That's what my camera. It's weird. But fix it in a second.
It's a little stereotypical, but the performance kind of elevates the writing. And obviously this is only 1 out of 3 parts, but I thought they had really good chemistry together. And I could kind of buy that, like, Dina saw Sam as like her light in the dark of this shitty town. She hates this town. Her dad's an alcoholic. Her mom was she dead or left?
I think her mom I thought her dad left and her mom started drinking.
No, that is in part 2. In this one, it's the dad is an alcoholic because the mom left.
Something like that.
It's something like that. She has a shitty home life, is what we're trying to get at.
Yeah.
And then she loses Sam, who is trying to be the popular good girl on the other side of town, which is the good, I guess, considered like the high class, like good side of town, which is another running theme through both of these.
Yeah.
You have the Sunnyvale people who are seen to be like kind of crazy, and because all these murders are happening.
Shady side, you mean? Yeah.
Oh yes. Okay, so yeah, shady side is, get it, shady side.
Yeah.
I just put that together. I'm stupid.
I put it together from like minute one. It's like from there, it's like, oh, we're not going to be subtle about this at all.
No,
No,
I can't believe I didn't put that together.
No, but this movie has like real. One of the things I don't like about it is that it doesn't really have a whole sense of any sort of subtlety about its themes. It's not trying to be clever about it. It's putting it in your face, which I don't know if I like personally. But anyway, sorry, continue.
No, you're fine. So you have this shady side versus Sunnyvale kind of rivalry, and Sam is trying to get in with the kids at Sunnyvale, trying to like escape her life. Seems like she kind of has like a very overbearing, like strict mom who is kind of controlling her life. So when Dina loses that, it kind of just spirals from there, which I appreciated. Just seeing, because it's not. You're right. This movie isn't subtle, but I think its characters, at least the ones that you are supposed to focus on, you can tell they're the main characters, are somewhat fleshed out. In the context, I guess, I don't know about in the context of just overall characters, but at least in the context of a slasher character, these felt more like real people than some I've seen.
Yeah, we definitely have gotten better writing since quite a few examples. For me personally, I tried to get myself invested a bit into the struggle that especially the two girls, Dina and Sam, were going through, and I got a different read on the situation. Dina rubbed me the wrong way completely, actually, in this movie. And I felt like that took me a bit out of it. Dina's character is very, even as Sam says, chaotic and rather violent and destructive. Granted, she recognizes that Sam is not that way and kind of wants to cling to her. But Dina is very impulsive. And one of the reasons that Dina is angry with her and actually just wants to act out against Sam is because she feels that she's being abandoned because Sam decides to go with her mom when her parents basically get divorced and separate. But looking at Shadyside, I can't blame her for leaving Shadyside, especially if she's only 30 minutes away. Apparently, and we established at the end that they can easily visit each other. And it wasn't Sam that broke up with Dina. Dina broke up with Sam. And and granted, some of Sam's proclivities towards like going towards a rather sleazy boyfriend is not something that I would support either. I think that, of course, that's a bad choice that the movie makes very clear. But Dina almost goes out of her way to be antagonistic towards Sam. And Dina is responsible for the accident in the car that almost kills Sam and the people in the car. Granted, they shouldn't have been there, but I don't like Dina. And I don't think that Dina is justified in like trying to act like Sam's responsible for everything. Sam, it turns out to be more of a victim than Dina is, and Sam can't even account for disturbing the witch's bones. She just happens to be there because Dina and the other girl, who I forget what her name is, the cheerleader, the drug leader, valedictorian, and whatnot, they helped crash the car.
Okay, so I kind of agree with you, but I also I guess I'm, and I'm not saying that you're not, but I'm seeing it from the character's point of view. I agree with you about the crashing, but it also is one of those things where I think both sides are guilty, because the people in the car, including Sam. Although Sam just kind of seemed to be there, like she didn't really
Yeah,
want to do this.
yeah, I don't really think Sam had a lot of control over what was going on.
I
She
think it was her
wanted to be
boyfriend
yeah, the boyfriend
uh,
kind of steered it.
steered them, like chasing after them, and you notice that Dina like backed out of doing that at the last second, but then the nosebleed kicked in, which I'm hoping they explain because they haven't yet, unless I missed a line of dialogue.
I don't know. I felt to read that she just got interrupted by the nosebleed, but she would have still committed to throwing the cooler. Also, she does it in the first place because Sam is there and she just wants to act out against Sam again and try to hurt her, which
See, I don't.
personality-wise rubs me in exactly the wrong way for me. But
Yeah, and that's fair. And see, it's hard to tell if she would have or not because the way the scene plays, she does hesitate, and like it looks like she's not going to do it, but then she gets sidetracked because she's got a nosebleed and it slips out of her hand.
yeah,
So at least for me personally, since I don't know what she would have ended up doing, it's an accident either way at that point. Um, but I think by the end of the movie, she does realize that she is self destructive, and you can tell that she cares for Sam. Um,
Sam does most of the apologizing though, which I think is out of proportion considering how much Dina should apologize for, and she really doesn't. And I don't
yeah,
know.
I don't know.
It's it pointed, but I do buy this sort of character. I do buy that this sort of person exists. Whether or not I like her, I do think it's pretty well acted. So
And
that I will give credit for.
I can sympathize with her to an extent, because obviously, while I've never done anything that crazy, I can imagine this kind of character like panicking, right? Like you're going to live with your mom who hates me. You're 30 minutes away. Like we're never gonna see each other again.
Well,
Um,
it's not as if they could never see each other again. They clearly established it
no,
despite her mom.
I'm
Well,
not saying that. I'm saying I can
exposing
see
her head,
Dina
sure.
thinking this and spiraling because this to me felt very much like a character whose life has spiraled out of control. Um, she doesn't get along with her brother. I assume she doesn't get along with her dad. She's got like one, I think, one friend, and that's the girl.
Who
Um,
herself is not a great influence,
no,
honestly.
and we'll talk about her. I
We'll
didn't
get into
mind
that.
her because I could see what they were doing with her. Because she's really just there to be killed. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, she's there for it's weird what they try to do with her. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But
but yeah, overall, I liked their relationship. It's not like a healthy relationship, but it's not like a beyond salvageable relationship, and I could see them salvage it.
I suppose.
The little brother, I ended up liking more than I thought I would. I thought he was just going to be the obnoxious comic relief, but he ends up being pretty helpful, and like he gets his own stuff to do that isn't just played for like slapstick or something.
No, he's a crucial part of this, actually. I like him the most out of the entire cast.
Although I have to ask, how old is he?
I I'm guessing based on where these characters are, I think he's 14. I
So how
think
old are the main girls supposed to be?
I at least 16, I would think, right? Eh,
They'd have to be close in age because they have a subplot with.
so this is weird because I mean the actors themselves are adults, but they're made to look like they're younger, as Hollywood would do. So it's kind of hard to get a gauge on it, but we do know that they're both in high school because they both attend the exact same facility. So I'd
Because
like to
that
think
was
they're at
my
least
thought.
1 or 2 years apart or something. Maybe
That
even
was
3.
my thought when she asks him to go into the bathroom with her because she doesn't feel safe alone. I was like, I understand why you don't want to go in there alone, but I also don't know how much older you are than this kid, like in the story.
She is. Maybe we should tackle the events of this film in order for this to make sense. But it well, she's not a very responsible person, and
No.
she would be fine with taking advantage with people because even her friend, the weird cheerleader guy, I guess, I don't really know what his role is in this exact thing. He doesn't wear a costume, so he's not a mascot, or maybe he is, and I guess the Shady Side couldn't be bothered to have a real mascot, so they just have this weird court jester running around with a, you know, with a doll of Seraph Fear. Um, but yeah, even he says, yeah, she's not a nice person. She's actually very mean to people, and who just seems. I think she sees a lot of vulnerability in the nerd, and I guess she sees no reason to be mean with him, especially if she could, I don't know, use him.
See,
I don't get a good grasp on her character, unfortunately. It's hard to tell.
see, I don't get the she's just like trying to use him because that in that same scene he even says, "Well, she must see something."
True. That I feel like I don't know because of, and we didn't get an opportunity to know more about her, which I feel like is, I think it's a waste personally of what they did with this actress and her performance and the character that was present because they put her through a shredder.
Literally, and it was
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, actually, I guess it's more like a slicer exactly, or what? What kind of machine was that exactly?
I have no idea, but it was fucking awesome. Like,
And she goes head first. It's a great effect. It's done very well. It's also incredibly savage.
well, and it was funny because I was like, okay, these are going to be our main four throughout this trilogy. Nothing will happen to them.
Nope.
And then she goes through that machine and was like, okay, all bets are off.
Well, main five, I guess, if we were going to count the weirdo. But I guess he was probably going to be killed too. I
Which
didn't
one?
think it was long for this world. The guy who decides to masturbate in the bathroom when he thinks
Oh
everyone
no,
else
yeah, I
is.
figured he was dead.
Yeah.
Because he was kind of like the odd man out in the group, but I was like, okay,
Yeah.
he will die, but these are going to be our main four, and they will be throughout the whole trilogy, and then all bets were off. So I really appreciated that. This movie also kept me guessing.
What did throw me off a bit was that they really drew out this kill. They had her screaming in the background quite a bit as she gets stabbed. So we lie in wait hoping that she's going to survive for like quite a few minutes just to see her die in a horrible way.
Welcome to slasher movies.
Yeah, it's
No, it's goofier in part two, but
that's where to a certain point I feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the technical brilliance of the kill is something that I can appreciate. So
yeah. And then I thought they were related. I wasn't sure what her relationship was to weird cheerleader guy.
I don't know. I guess they were just friends.
Because he's over at her house.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, we should talk about that scene a bit. So, valedictorian girl or top of the class girl or something. Maybe they're 18 or 17.
Well, they would have to be because they're graduating.
Yeah. So I guess he must be. I don't know. We don't guess when their ages. Even so, in this scene, we exited with these two girls who she's babysitting. Um, she criticizes the guy for breaking in for like one of the killers for breaking into the house and exposing the kids to danger. She says, "Wow, it's really messed up that they would do that while kids are around." All the while, she has this whole pile of drugs just on the dining room table right in front of them, and saying, "Hey, here's what they are. Don't eat them, guys." It's Yeah, sometimes I get this mixed message that's going on, but I also realize, oh yeah, Shady Side is full of deviance. But I know that the movie tries to play it both ways in some ways, where we're supposed to try to feel bad about them for dying, which is understandable. At the same time, they weren't exactly the greatest people either, but at least they were there helping.
Yeah.
I get mixed messages with what the movie is trying to do, but I do know it's trying to send messages about its themes as well. So I'm wondering where the focus was in terms of plot writing. So
Yeah. So I guess this is a review, so it doesn't really matter for all over the place. But I guess just to run down the general story is, there was a witch in the late 1600s, who was killed for being a witch. and then buried, and now curses the town. From then point on throughout history, there have been brutal slayings in the town of what was it, Shady Town,
Shady Side
Shady
and
Side, which
Sunnyvale.
is
Yeah,
which is in Ohio apparently.
yeah.
Which is interesting because a lot of the big slashers take place in kind of the Midwest.
Yep.
And so in 1994, Dina is a mess. She's self-destructing, pushing everyone away. And during a prank gone wrong, they disturb the bones, which basically puts a target on her ex-girlfriend Sam, and they
Sam
have to.
starts bleeding from the nose, and then the blood gets on the bones, and that's why the witch targets her in particular.
Yep, you get the blood on the bones. Although that does make me wonder if the blood on the bones is what makes you a target. What summoned them before then? Because we open with a kill.
Yeah, and also, why does Dina's nose start bleeding first? Like, what triggers that exactly?
Yeah, and I mean, some of this may be picked up in part 3. If it is, we will acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But we have to go based on the information we have so far.
Yeah.
Unless, because it seems like two things. It seems like you have the one where it's, if you bleed on the bones, she sends these people after you directly. But then in part 2, which we'll get to here in a minute, it also kind of implies that she does this randomly too. I might have to rewatch these when part 3 comes out, but
the vengeance seems a little aimless in some ways, which I'm not.
It is, but I think that's almost the point. There's no one specifically she's taking vengeance on, because they explicitly say that her vengeance is on the town itself.
Sure.
So it might just be that. It might just be random, and then we have this one instance where she has a specific target because of the blood on the bone.
I suppose. But she'll kill Sunnyvalers as well as Shady Siders, so.
Yeah, she doesn't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it on just that level of I'm sitting back, watching a movie, and it's a fun slasher. I didn't think too hard. I didn't think a lot about some of the themes, but I agree that they are in your face, which I don't think is necessarily a terrible thing. But for me, what really worked in this movie was the characters and the kills. I guess we should mention this is a hard R, or would be if it wasn't on Netflix. Very bloody. Not a lot of sex in this one though. They talk about it, but you don't see anything.
Well, they almost get into it in the bathroom scene, like in our catharsis moment before the big climax.
Which isn't the climax.
Well, I mean, clearly, our clown character, he clearly masturbated in the bathroom by himself, as he then admits. The nerd and the valedictorian didn't do anything. Apparently, barely got to first base, and our lesbian characters definitely would have done something had they not gotten spooked. But it's implied that they've done it before, and they'll do it again. So it's definitely sexual themes are definitely present there.
Yeah.
And I did see enough into part 2 where some characters are clearly having sex in the cabin. So
we'll get to that, because I have a lot to say about that too. But that actually makes sense, because if this is aping that 90s Scream and stuff like that, there wasn't really any sex, and we talked about it, but they didn't have the long drawn out sex scenes.
Made me feel a little uncomfortable with apparently high schoolers doing this sort of thing. But then again, this is also adult actors playing something in a high school setting. It's not something that hasn't happened before in a horror slasher. So
he's gonna hate me when we do the Friday the 13th movies. But yeah, and then obviously this movie ends on a cliffhanger, because you think it's over, but then it's not, because Sam is possessed.
Yep.
And I have to admit, I know you said you didn't like her, but I was kind of worried they were going to kill Dina. I was a little worried for a second.
Well, by this point, I started getting a bit more used to her character. Wouldn't necessarily say I would miss her a whole lot, but it would have been sad because they were trying to repair themselves. I think it was a little out of proportion because I think Dina is a bit more. Um, I think she needs much more repair than Sam does, but that's a matter of opinion, I suppose.
Yeah.
Even though my opinion is
Well,
correct.
I think we've talked almost an hour just about this one.
Yeah.
So I am going to move into final thoughts. This is really good. This is not high art or anything, but it is a fun time. It's a good, hour and 40 minutes or whatever. It works well enough almost as a standalone movie, but there is a cliffhanger because it is part one of a trilogy. But I would consider all of these movies, not TV episodes. I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Well, for me personally, I think there's elements that I enjoy, but I don't know if I enjoyed it as a whole exactly. I think that there's enough mystery around this to the point where, although it could have potentially been a standalone, I think it was deliberately constructed as an episodic thing. Episodic in a very loose term, considering
They're all
deliberately as
movie length.
part one, part two, and part three. And I think it's an interesting idea. I don't know. I think there could have been some tightening up in terms of writing. Good technical elements. I think there was decent pacing throughout it. I didn't get bored, certainly, which is that I think the depth of movies is boredom. So it definitely didn't do that. I don't know if I'd watch it again personally, but I'll give it some fair stuff. 3 out of 5.
Okay.